Hi, and welcome back to another Ask Me Anything session at Rapyd. I'm Joel Yarbrough. Appreciate you joining us. I'm thrilled to have with us today Manoj Dugar from JPMorgan, who's a long-term luminary of the financial services sector in Asia, had multiple different roles, which he'll share with us, to dig in on the role of banks and fintechs and how partnerships come together to drive the ecosystem forward. So without any further ado, Manoj, thanks for joining us. For the folks, would you mind just introducing them to your current role and what you do?
First of all, foremost, Joel, thank you very much for inviting me for this session. I'm really thrilled. To give a background, have been in the transaction banking space, which is really supporting the working capital of financial institutions and corporates over the last 23 years. Currently, I run the wholesale payment business for ASEAN for JPMorgan. Clearly, when we define wholesale payments, it's a conglomeration of all the payment verticals coming together, whether it's on the cash management side, on the trade side, and as we expand into other sectors like merchant acquiring and commercial cards. So we brought all these 4 business units into one single family called wholesale payments, and that's what I run for ASEAN, for JPMorgan.
Wonderful. And how did you end up in the payments business? Was this a carefully cultivated plan?
Not at all, Joel. So clearly, after having done my accountancy major, I was keen to get into an area of finance, and no better place than banks. And that's where I ventured into a banking ecosystem. But obviously, I started my career on the investor services side or the custodial business. In India, at that point of time, and in the India market was moving from a physical to a dematerialized environment. So digital at that point of time as well, as custody business was getting digitized. So that was the first 3 years, and I wanted to get into the core of banking and happened to get into the payments business. And that's why my journey started, and it's never looked back. It's been the last 20 years into the payment business as well. And great to see the evolution of the payment business over these years as well, which continues to have that dynamism which is required to keep us all excited.
Yeah. And in the custody business, physical means very physical, right?
Oh, absolutely, very physical. To some extent, like cash at that point of time as well, and cash and checks.
Yeah, like in New York when they back the trucks against each other and they're throwing bundles at each other. Like, that's the business, as sexy as it can be. Cool. And so given that we're recording this during the Singapore Fintech Festival, and you do a lot of partnerships with fintechs, and obviously you have a lot of amazing global infrastructure that people are dying to get access to help scale their use cases. When you look at the fintech ecosystem and you look at enabling partners or not enabling partners, what are you looking for from a partnership model that's attractive to you on the behalf of the bank?
The way I look at, clearly, it's all about clients. And how their needs are evolving and changing. So we really look at what are some of the client demands emerging, especially when we look at from a corporate perspective. How are their treasury practices, their treasury and digital transformation evolving? What are some of the needs, challenges, and potentially how can we create differentiation in our solutions? So to me, that's one angle which we look at when we think about our solutions and potential areas of collaborations with fintechs to be able to address the needs of the clients as well. And the payment ecosystem has obviously gone through significant digital transformation as well. Many of our clients whom we engage with are obviously continuous to embark on digital transformation. Especially post the COVID situation, things have only got accelerated to a great extent. And clearly we look forward to collaborating with them in their digital transformation journey. And that's where the fintech collaboration in many cases have helped us address those needs. The second area of collaboration is really around some of the newer technologies, how we could potentially leverage. Fintechs have really helped us in terms of accelerating some of the adoption of some of those technologies, either at our end or at the client's end as well. So to me, in my mind, those are really the 2 areas, the way we think about collaboration with fintechs, is really looking at our client challenges, solutions, and differentiation, and how do we could adopt some of the newer technology and embed it as part of the client solutions.
I mean, I know JPMorgan, among other things, has always regarded itself as a technology company, right? And spends billions to be a technology company. How easy is it to internalize technology coming from the outside in that fintech enablement world?
Yeah. As I said, right, it's all about client opportunities and challenges and capabilities and differentiation, which we are focusing on. Clearly, when we think about some of the core infrastructure, we're obviously developing that in-house. That's where we spend our large dollars, right? We spend close to $12 billion in our technology vertical itself. It's really about continuously restacking our technological assets and upgrading our platforms. However, as we think about client solutions and challenges, and as we expand into geographies, there are areas of collaboration which I spoke about in terms of differentiating and leveraging those fintechs to enhance our proposition. In some cases, helps us make us more agile as well. Areas could be around distribution and reach. How do we leverage some of our fintech partners to be able to reach that distribution? Areas could be around technology. So clearly, those are the areas where we think there is an opportunity to collaborate. And depending on the model, the complexity, the nature and type, we try and adopt different types of models which we can adapt into our backend infrastructure. It could be something like a simple referral arrangement, but more importantly, some of these technologies, we've also got it embedded into our core infrastructure as well. So yeah, depending on the nature and complexity of these, we have been agile and flexible in terms of looking at some of these fintech collaboration.
I used to do a lot of consulting to banks, including technology and internet consulting.
True.
And as a consultant, you feel like a genius when you sell a big project, right? But then when you think about how a big company operates, it turns out that your customer was the person that 2 years ago had to think about the project and get it on the roadmap and get it budgeted and create this window for you to be this spontaneous genius. And it really wasn't until I sold quite a few projects. I'm like, wait a second, they knew where they were going anyway, right? I'm just a vehicle to help them get there. So when you look at these, these opportunistic or partnerships with fintechs, and you mentioned that there are a lot of client-driven needs. Do you feel like your team has a backlog of things that we wish that we had a solution to, Aramco's problem or whatever, or are you often surprised by solutions and then you kind of back test them with your customers? Like, how often are you looking for something in particular, versus are things surprising you? Would you say?
I would say it's a combination of both. In many cases, obviously our focus is really in terms of differentiating our solutions with our clients and looking at innovative ways in how we could refine the client solutions or client experience and helping them in the digital transformation. So we are obviously proactively engaging with our clients as well in terms of some of the areas. That could be one area which probably throws us some opportunities for us to come back and look at solutions along with fintech partners. There are a lot of infrastructural changes which are happening in the ecosystem as well. So it's all about spending time with our teams and thinking about how some of these infrastructural changes could be adopted by our clients as well. So it could be proactive from our side as well in terms of looking at some of those solutions and making it available for the clients. In many cases, the clients may not be ready with it for those solutions as well. But it's an opportunity for us to embed those solutions with our clients as well. So I think it's a combination of both. It could be, in some cases, some of the client challenges which could come to us. Or in other ways, it's more about proactive engagement with those clients and looking at potential solutions.
And do you see your team's readiness to partner having increased over time? Has the organization changed?
Oh yeah, absolutely, no doubt about that. And I spoke about our journey in the transaction banking space over the last 20 years. We would have never envisaged thinking about fintech partnership as actively as we probably would have done, as we're doing it now versus probably 5-10 years back. And as you look at most of the large financial institutions and banks, you tend to see dedicated teams being set up as well across various lines of businesses. Whether it's, I can speak about the wholesale payment business itself. So we have a dedicated team which are really looking at some of these areas around innovation, partnership, new technology, and really proactively engaging some of the fintechs to help address some of the solutions as well. So clearly, there has been change and shift in mindset as well as you look at fintech collaboration. And it's both ways, I presume. We've seen how fintechs have matured as well and are definitely looking forward to collaboration with some of the large institutional banks in some cases as well.
For sure, there's no question.
Yeah.
From our perspective, it's a very, very important part of what we do, right? As we build out our network, is to work with partners that have great licenses, great local capabilities, great connectivity, great processing capabilities, and then we really externalize it and build use cases on top of it, right? So that's a very big part of what we do. To what degree do you see it not working, right? Are there models that have failed for you? Are there collaboration approaches that have been, real misfires that you've tried to reset and not do again?
Yeah, I would say when you think about solutions, challenges, innovation, there are bound to be bumps on the road as well. I think it's very important to ensure that you and your partner are well aligned in terms of the solution which we are recommending and the end goal which you want to achieve, both in the near term and the future as well. If there are certain misalignment in terms of what the product which you're bringing to the table versus what your longer term, medium to longer term vision is, there has to be bumps on the road as well, potentially. We've come across cases around potentially the enhanced level of due diligence which needs to be exercised. And you can understand, right, as a bank, clearly the regulatory scrutiny, the data secrecy are so critical in that journey as well. Those are areas where probably you would have seen bumps as well, potentially. So no doubt.
Part of the model.
Part of the model.
Enhanced due diligence is part of the model, for sure. Are there things that you've looked at, whether your team's partnerships or competitors, that you thought were really good examples of where a bank that's been maturing has done a fintech partnership that has really worked out well or changed the ecosystem? Are there things that that inspire you to say, oh, let's do more of that?
As I said, for us, one is obviously looking at opportunities from a client lens angle. So clearly, as we see the infrastructure developing, as we see client needs evolving, that's the lens which we wear in terms of addressing the solution. It may work for certain financial institutions, it may not necessarily work for other institutions. From our perspective, we know which are our target market clientele which we are going after, what is their longer term journey looking like as they look at their treasury transformation, and how can we step in to help accelerate or meet their expectation as well. So for us, looking at those opportunities and clearly working with partners and addressing the solution is a primary objective. Yes, no doubt, it's important to keep a watch on what competitors are doing as well, and how is that making a mark. If that's something which is working out in the ecosystem, definitely an area for us to watch out as well. But we're obviously keen and working actively in terms of promoting some of the newer technology and differentiated and innovative solution. That's been the mantra for JPMorgan. You've heard it from Jamie right from top of the house, and you would have probably in the Singapore Fintech Festival heard from our wholesale payment head, Takis, as well, talking about some of the new technology and how which we are leveraging there to drive solutions for our clients.
So in terms of, you mentioned ecosystem, right? So you take a step back and look at regulatory impact or network modernization around the world. Do you see, or maybe you have a favorite trend, between real-time payments, open banking? Are there things that you see as the most transformational for how your business functions in terms of how local networks and then these trends are expanding across the world?
Oh yeah, I think I alluded to it a little earlier in the conversation. The target clientele whom we deal with, they are obviously very keen in terms of looking at treasury transformations. We recently did a survey with some of our corporate treasury team, and 70% of them talked about digital transformation. It's easier said, but clearly there are various steps to be taken in the direction to help you achieve the digital transformation, because it's a multi-year project in that regard. So from our perspective, the models which clients are changing, it's just not about leveraging the new technology and helping in digital transformation, but their operating model is changing as well. How things, as you guys speak about, am I right, in terms of moving from offline to online, how moving from B2B to B2C in many of the industries is a trend which we see across our client base. The customer expectations has evolved as well. Many of the corporate treasury was probably a little more batch-based process, if I could say. End-of-day statements, end-of-day or a month-end or a weekly reconciliations. Slowly and steadily, that is moving towards real-time treasury. To us, that's a big transformation which is happening. And how could we help support in that journey is what we are all working towards. How do we make connectivity much more real-time? How do we make information flow completely real-time? Visibility real-time as well. And you can understand, given the large global network which we have, the multiple geographies which we operate in, the multiple business units which we have to service our clients as well, it's not easy in terms of implementing those solutions. But thanks to some of the technology, thanks to some of the infrastructural changes with the evolution of real-time payment infrastructures which are evolving across markets, the API connectivity in terms of getting the visibility as well are really helping us transform treasury from a batch-based process to a real-time treasury. That's a big transformational change.
I mean that by itself is a pretty exciting buzz phrase, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I hear enough. Real-time treasury has pretty unbelievable implications, right, for how every aspect of the business works, right?
Yeah.
And as you said at the beginning, the businesses around cash management don't necessarily sound sexy, but they affect absolutely everything.
Yeah, and this is also correlated to the change in business models and the new technologies and the infrastructural changes in terms of their new geographies which they are entering into, or new payment types which are emerging in many of those places as well. And how could we support those clients and this journey as well? So all these culminates into treasury transformations.
And then in terms of what we've all been going through for the last 8 or 10 months, how has COVID affected how you face off to your clients on a day-to-day basis in terms of being able to help them with this digitalization journey?
Yeah. So obviously, when you look about the COVID situation, clearly we've realized that things have moved from physical to virtual. There's no doubt about it. The initial part of the COVID journey, people were really focused around people, their health, their safety versus some of these projects. So obviously, some of the pieces, obviously in terms of our digital journey, implementations did take a little backseat in the first part of the year as well, given the focus around resilience, contingency, people, their safety was topmost priority as well, the right things to do as well. But we've definitely started seeing end of Q2, early Q3, things coming back. People, obviously, the organizations have realized that this is a new norm as well to some extent. And our discussions have only intensified, I would say, over the last 3 to 6 months. Even as we come to the end of the year, we have meetings lined up over the next 2 weeks as well, talking to clients about some of the treasury transformation as well. So clearly, some of the discussions have only got accelerated, and we will see many of those getting materialized as we step into 2021.
That's super exciting. Before we started, you started to mention some of the things you had to do to help your teams outside of Singapore adapt to the virus and get ready for what you guys expected to happen. What are some of the things you had to do to get people in the Philippines or India ready to go?
Yeah. It's interesting. We have probably close to 70 to 80% of our workforce operating from home post the COVID breakout. We had never planned for that, frankly. We all have our own business continuity plans, which takes into consideration either a city outage or a country outage, but not a global pandemic. Never planned. But touch wood, I think it worked out well overall. As soon as the COVID hit sometime in December last year, we ensured that at least the necessary infrastructure was made available to our employees. We have close to 50,000 employees here. as you talked about Manila and India, which are large back office centers as well. The necessary infrastructure was made available to them in case there were contingency of people working from home. And come February, we had 80% of our workforce working from home as well. We managed the situation. As Takis would have probably mentioned, we have been processing close to $6 trillion of flows on a daily basis. During this pandemic, we processed close to $9 trillion of flows, which is remarkable at this pandemic as well. So clearly the volume started picking up potentially as well. There was a lot of flush of liquidity as well, supporting our clients in this time, either on the liquidity side or on the credit side was super critical as well. So supporting those clients has been helpful. So yeah, I think things worked out well across markets, across geographies. Even now, obviously, the countries goes through multiple waves as well. We bring people into office, but there are circumstances where we have to obviously resort back, as you've seen situation in Hong Kong potentially as well. So treading it carefully, but things worked out well across geographies and across markets. Sure. And more importantly, I think Asia was seen as someone obviously who's seen the COVID situation earlier in the life cycle, and we were able to pass some of the best practices to our counterparts in Europe and US as things started unfolding there as well.
Even in the US?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just a little US joke. So let's go back to this, the raw numbers, and for those who have no idea, I used to work at JPMorgan myself. The $6 trillion to $9 trillion number, right? Put on your fintech investor hat. I mean, that number is beyond, I think, most people's understanding of how big a global bank really is. But that said, are there trends that are happening outside of the global bank world where you look at payment flows, you look at use cases that you think, aha, in 5-10 years, that's actually going to attack some of this $6 trillion, and you'll start to see some of those flows move to alternative providers. What are some of those use cases that you think are the most interesting and the most scalable going forward?
It's interesting you ask this question. So I remember when we, probably 10 years back, when we used to manage cash management and cash and checks used to be quite dominant. And people talked about electronification at that point of time because things were moving from checks to ACH and RTGS network. And people were worried that this will impact the overall cash management wallet. It will help in reduce the transaction flow and revenue overall. But the payment industries continue to grow by leaps and bounds. The velocity of money has only increased as we've transformed and moved from physical to electronic. And as you see the next wave of payment transformation, as you get into some of the newer channels, whether it's real-time payment infrastructure, whether it's wallets, we definitely see emergence of some of these real-time payment infrastructure and wallets magnifying over the period of time. So clearly, we will see definitely exploration of these flows. And obviously, fintechs and banks are all coming together in some of these areas as well, no doubt, potentially. But I just think that given the huge opportunity which payment industry has for this ecosystem, there's an opportunity for both to grow from here on.
Always an opportunity for both to grow. And what about sort of fiat, electronic fiat issuance? So central bank digital currencies, global stablecoin initiatives. Do you put much credit in them in terms of being able to shift meaningful flows from a corporate banking perspective?
Early stages, I would say, for us, it's the underlying technology which is very critical. The way we've looked at some of these tools is really looking at how could we leverage the underlying blockchain technology to transform the way payments or cash management is being done. You may have read recently that we announced a new business unit within wholesale payments called Onyx, which really focuses on some of these transformation technology to try certain use cases as well. Obviously, Mr. Ravi Menon also alluded to it in terms of how we've collaborated with MAS as part of the Project Ubin journey over the last 3-4 years in the various phases, and now taking that to commercialization stage. And that's the team which is working as part of the Onyx team to really help transform the way some of the multi-currency settlement using the distributed ledger is. So from our perspective, it's all about trying to see how some of the underlying technology could be used to drive some of these transformational change in the payment space, and potentially seeing how you could help clients as well in terms of using the shared infrastructure to drive some of the multi-currency settlement amongst their various entities within JPMorgan as well. So these are some of the use cases which we are working on, and clearly an area to watch out over the next 3 to 5 years.
For sure. There's no question. Something will happen. We're just not exactly sure what.
Yeah.
Something will definitely happen. Are there areas that you'd love to see the regulators push further along on? Are there things you're waiting on to say, look, that's a problem that's not yet been addressed to the degree you think it should be?
I would just put it the other way around. Clearly, many of these collaborations and innovations would not have happened without, obviously, the initiatives which have been taken by the regulators as well. First and foremost is the infrastructural changes which are happening in the landscape, especially with the emergence of real-time payment infrastructure, with the emergence of wallets and mobile payments. This has really driven exploration of the payment industry, and more importantly, some of the innovation which we are seeing in the payment ecosystem. The push towards using some of the newer technologies. I spoke about blockchain and how working with MAS has really helped in terms of trying to see how we could leverage these technology to commercialize these as well. Even for that matter, it was good to hear around the work which is being done on the APEX program as well, the API exchange, and how we probably enhance some of our collaborations using the fintech marketplace to do some of the experimentation of some of the use cases as well, which we continue to use and hopefully do more of. It was also good to hear some of the work around the cross-border linkages, what we see on Pay Now versus Prompt Pay.
Yep.
I think that's one area which obviously the central banks would definitely slowly with this will set the trend in terms of coming together and collaborating and see how we make cross-border much more instant as well. So I think that's one area where we'll see probably work with regulators. And obviously we've seen the CBDCs you spoke about as well with a lot of banks, where a lot of central banks are now looking at as well. Those are a couple of areas which probably we'll see.
For sure.
Engaging.
Do you see, I mean, I actually don't know the answer, so I ask you. Do you see FX spreads going down at an aggressive rate, or are they relatively stable over time from your business perspective? Or you can say, I decline to state.
It's not necessarily about FX. Obviously, we are all in this industry to address client needs and be competitive in that journey as well. People even said that when checks move to cash, spreads will go away. As things become real time and instant, obviously this has an impact on some of our, as you increase competition, there is an impact on fees or FX spreads. But as long as we continue to add value, differentiate, innovate, I'm sure there are various ways in which each of us could generate value for our clients and then continue to grow the overall wallet. That's the way I look at it.
For sure. Oh, I totally agree. I ask only because on the retail side and the remittance side, it's a bit of a bloodbath, right? So spreads have collapsed as larger and larger consumer players are raising VC money and advertising, et cetera, and some of them become quite profitable, charging less and less for the retail side of the service. Just wondering if the same thing was happening on the commercial side of the service.
Yeah, but the way I look at Joel is that's one of the verticals, if I could say. But it's all about how we are providing end-to-end solutions to our clients as well, and how we are adding value across the transaction life cycle of our clients, and how we. That's what many of you guys are in that journey as well. So hopefully that will help.
Absolutely. Do you find, so maybe going to openness, right, and giving an environment, I think you mentioned in real-time treasury, and I think that implies more cloud-based treasury solutions as well. Do you see a lot of your clients going away from products that you're directly providing to third-party cloud-based treasury providers, and then you needing to step up and provide full access to data and transaction capabilities?
So clearly, as you look at the fintech engagement, is obviously has matured over a period of time. especially in the last 3-4 years. If I was speaking in any industry conference 3 years back, it was all about how are we competing against each other. It was more about competition. And today it's great, we're talking about collaboration. And in many cases, we are our clients as well. As I say, am I right? It's all about 3 C's, how we've evolved from being competitors to collaborators, and in some cases, clients as well. And similarly is the approach for some of our, we do see, as you look at many of our corporate clientele, or in some cases, financial institutions, we do see engagement of, they obviously, given our relationship, given the breadth of solutions which we provide to our clients, typically they would want to engage in terms of providing some of the solutions as well. But there could be unique needs in particular market or unique capabilities which many of you guys bring to the table as well. And in some cases, we've seen some of the larger corporates adopting and getting direct with fintechs as well, to some extent. But we definitely think that with our solutions, with our collaboration, we are able to make meaningful contribution to the client demands. Hopefully that sustains.
There's no question, right? And as a collaborator, I think the partnership has been great from our perspective, right? The team, I think, has bent over backwards. It's very clear the technology investments that have been made to be a great partner on the outside. So unsolicited testimonial, but it's been a good collaboration, and definitely we've appreciated being brought into some client opportunities as well.
True.
So all very good. In terms of technologies going forward and what you start as you start to, I mean, we're at the end of the year, planning hopefully is behind you, but maybe not, maybe it never ends. As you start to look at 2021 and some of the changes that you're anticipating, are there particular technologies that you've got your eye on that you think will have meaningful impact for the business over the next year and a half, 2 years?
Yeah. While we started as finance background, we've all become great technologists to a great extent as well, and how we could leverage some of these technologies. And more importantly is that these technologies are changing quite rapidly as well. So it's important to keep pace with some of those technologies. But clear to answer your question, I think from my perspective, a couple of technologies to watch out, and I'm speaking more from our wholesale payment experience and our engagement with institutional clients. One is the entire AI and machine learning tools, how that could change the way many of our client experience could be enhanced, or business processes could be changed as well. It's not only about financial services. I know across clientele, across industries, AI and machine learning is being looked at by many of these clients in terms of their processes as well as their client experience. So I think that's one area to watch out as well. And clearly, we are working on many of those tools at this point of time in terms of concepts to really refine and enhance some of our cash management solution to that extent. The second which comes to my mind is a little early for me to predict, but how the entire 5G network will transform, especially with the humongous amount of data and the speed in which the data would get transformed.
Very low latency.
All the Internet of Things, what impact does it have in that network will be important to watch out. And third, we spoke about in length is really the blockchain technology. I know it's been there for a while. There have been some hypes, ups and downs, but there have been some great use cases and the commercialization angle, which a lot of clients have been now started to work upon as well, including ourselves. So these are some of the things which comes to my mind in terms of to watch out.
Really good. In relative to AI, I mean, you mentioned efficiency effectively, or I was going in terms of a fourth technology. Have you seen a lot of impact so far in terms of process automation? I mean, if I go to a different kind of a conference, there's a lot of talk about robotic process automation, et cetera, and clearly you have an enormous operational footprint. Have you seen real impact in terms of how you've been able to make processes move faster?
Your reference is towards the AI and machine learning technologies?
Maybe a little bit less so, and more in terms of automation of human activities in the system, and then AI presumably will go on top of that in a later phase.
Yeah, sure. Clearly, two areas. One is obviously around the operational processes, and second is around our product capabilities, if I could say. Those are two areas where we've definitely used some of these new technologies. We have a large shared service center, both in Manila and in Mumbai, from an Asia-Pacific perspective. And clearly, the robotic process automation has really been instrumental in terms of leveraging that. In some cases, automating some of our routine processes, and in some cases, making it a little more intelligent as well. I'll give you an example, potentially, that many of the, we talked about $9 trillion of flows, but we know that with increased flows, there is an associated risk as well. Potential fraudulent transactions, which we obviously seen increase over the years as well. How we've used these tools and technologies to embed that into our payment infrastructure to identify potential changes in trends and patterns and potential fraudulent transactions. So we've embedded that into our operational infrastructure as well. So that's a great example how some of these tools have been deployed, and more importantly, some of the AI and machine learning tools have been deployed in the back-end infrastructure to identify such potential fraudulent transactions. Is one of the examples I could think of.
Fraudsters are always early adopters of any opportunity.
And the other is also the capabilities as well, how you could leverage some of these tools. One of the significant challenges for many of our corporate clients is really around how do you help forecast more accurately, because that's one of the single biggest challenge for most of the corporate treasury. And these tools, technologies has given us an opportunity to partner and collaborate with clients to build some of those capabilities as well.
Very cool.
Yeah.
As long as they ignore 2020 from a forecasting accuracy perspective.
True.
Tough year to forecast. Well, very cool. I really appreciate you coming by, enjoyed the conversation, and look forward to a lot more collaboration to come. So thank you, Manoj, for joining us, and thank you for tuning in.
Thank you for getting me. Pleasure.